Concerns over Argentina's economy is also playing into the outlook for the region as a whole. Ratings agency Fitch is predicting a decline in growth in Latin America this year, and says that growth will only hit 1.5%, down from 2.3% last year. Declines in the largest economies in Mexico and Brazil are driving the fall. Recession fears also in Argentina are influencing the outlook. There were some bright spots, though, in the data, including commodity demand, green transition, and a growing manufacturing industry. For more about the economy in Argentina, we're now joined by Gilson Schwartz, a professor of economics at the University of Sao Paulo. Good to see you again. Welcome back to the show. Last time that we talked, you had concerns whether or not some of these things would work. And this was before the strikes, although I'm sure it was predictable for you that there's going to be some upset people given how high inflation is. Tell us, why are they striking, and why particularly right now?
Well, thank you for having me on the show again. And this is a particularly tragic moment for Argentina, because it's something that has been observed every time there's a social crisis. A populist regime can be rightist, can be leftist, but when you have this huge crisis, inflation at about 200% a year, so it's really a tragic situation. In these situations, usually the populists, they like what we economists call shock therapy. So the idea here with the shock, the idea of a shock, is that you hit the country with measures, with strong measures, without giving any time for discussion, for debate. We have had this in Brazil, we have had this in Argentina as well, and other countries. The shock.
But hang on. They just had a major election. They elected somebody they knew was going to take somewhat extreme measures. In fact, arguably, he hasn't taken all the extreme measures yet. I don't understand what those are striking, what they would like to see happen. If he doesn't take action, things get worse. If he does take action, things might get better, whether they agree or not, but they did elect this person just very, very recently.
Well, there's the political side and the economic side. The political side, the problem with shocks is that you have to run over Congress, you have to run over the judiciary. This has happened already in Brazil, and afterwards what happens is that the judicial system, the courts, they just dismantle the shock. So you have this effect in the short run. Even capital markets get excited about it because, wow, it's a shock, it's going to change overnight. But then you have this kind of powering back of institutions, mainly the judiciary and the legislative. So the courts and the Congress are the political element that really makes it, the idea of a shock, really not feasible. On the economic side, it's not just a matter of being a shock, short-term or long-term. It's really about if it's a therapy, you need a diagnosis. So the main question here is the Argentina economy problem a problem of high wages, a problem of social excesses in the distribution of income? Of course not. It's a decadent economy, just as happened in Brazil, but on in a larger scale, lost its industry. So the idea to go over this, to propose a new political economy and new economic policies requires an adjustment. Okay, we can go that far, but then how can you get to raise taxes, raise tax collection when you have such a high level of cuts in social expenditure?
Right, I mean, what you're speaking of is what almost every single country in one form or another go through, right? The balance between government spending, taxes, and the whole economic development. What do you think Milei should do at this point going forward? They have a plan. They're working to implement it. It's not going to, happen in the next 2 weeks. Doesn't it take time?
Well, it will take time. From the point of view of the unions, the game has already begun, and the courts have already actually canceled out the part of the package, the part of the omnibus legislation that affects wages and the social system. This has already been halted by the judiciary. So it's already, people are trying to negotiate. Those who are not so extreme in terms of their ultra-liberal positions in Congress are really bringing Milei into a more moderate position. And of course, you have the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. it extended a very favorable loan so that Argentina has time to move on with its adjustment.
What grade would you give Milei right now in his first sort of few months here in office? What grade would you give him?
Well, we know that it was a very, very divided vote in Argentina. Half the population supports him, half the population is in opposition. So it would be really hard to understand his position now as more than 6 or 7 at the best, because, you know, there is some oxygen pouring into the economy from the IMF, and there is a general feeling, especially in the middle classes, that he might make an adjustment that will not affect the middle class, will just cut the workers' rights and social benefits. So that's the issue. And now the social contract, as mentioned in the report. Is Argentina capable of overcoming the unionized, the Peronist tradition of a social contract, or will these institutions, unions, and of course the politicians fight back?
Gilson, before I let you go, give me one bright spot in the economy. I think we mentioned a little bit about commodities, but is there a bright spot that you see that could help Milei over the next several months here?
Well, surprisingly enough, I would say that this is Brazil, because we have just had the announcement of a 300 billion reais, that amounts to about 50 to 60 billion dollars that will be injected in the Brazilian industrial system. And we know that Argentina has already had in the past a very symbiotic and positive connection to the Brazilian economy. So Milei at first reacted against Mercosur, but I think that his way out of the crisis, his way out of recession, is more exports, more integration into the regional super machine that Brazil has become.
Well, it's been just a few weeks of him being in office. I'm sure he has lots of these plans to counter, but I'm sure there'll be disagreements. Gilson, thank you very much. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you.